Foul. 2 balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. This is way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined today by Daniel Starkand, and we are talking Dodgers baseball. Of course, you're here at DodgerHeads, but Daniel, we're a quarter of the way through the season. Of course, we know the recent stretch the Dodgers were on. They win 7 in a row before blowing yesterday's game, Sunday's game, twice. First in the division, a half game up on the Padres, 5 games up on the Giants, second best record in baseball. Let me start with this question. 1/4 of the way through the season, how would you grade the way that the Dodgers have played thus far?
I mean, it hasn't been perfect, but I still think you got to give them an A. Like, if you look at their record, they're 27-13, which puts them on pace to win like 108 games or something. And they've dealt with some, significant injuries. Clayton Kershaw, Blake Treinen's out. Like a number of different relievers have missed time. I'd say on the position player side, they've been a little more fortunate when it comes to luck, but things haven't exactly gone right for them. It feels like they've had like a few excruciating losses, like games they should have won. Taking that into account, like, I think you got to be pleased with where they're at. Obviously, you wish there wasn't another team in the division like the Padres that's right on your heels. Like, usually when, if you're 27-13, you want to be 4 or 5 games up in the division or whatever. But that's on your control. You can only control your own games and how you play. And I think right now, the Dodgers are playing great baseball. Obviously, yesterday it was a bit of a sour ending, I'd say. But outside of that, it was a perfect week. They had won 7 straight. They're playing every day. They got doubleheaders, some games. The pitching staff is getting really taxed. So overall, I think you got to be happy. I still think this team has another gear that it could get to that we haven't seen yet. But, I mean, it's still May, so.
Yeah. I'm with you. I mean, this feels like a classic Dodgers, sort of like the way fans are interacting with it, where it feels like people are disappointed, and yet you look up and they're 27-13, as you said. They're on pace for like 109 wins. They have the best run differential of any team in baseball, and they have the second best record. They're winning the division, like all of the things that you want them to be doing. You kind of hinted at it. I would say the Dodgers have been average to above average as far as injury luck. I mean, there's a couple guys, Heaney, Kershaw, who have missed sort of some significant time, but besides that, I would say they've done all right, which, looking around the league, short spring training is kind of as much as you could hope for. But yeah, I'm with you. I think as fans, we should be thrilled with the way things have gone. Obviously, there was a stretch where the offense was lagging and the pitching was carrying them. Now it feels like the offense is starting to pick up. We're going to talk about some of the guys at the top of the lineup: Mookie Betts, Trey Turner, Freddie Freeman, all trending in the right direction offensively. And so, absolutely, I think it's an A for the first quarter of the season. I mean, if the Dodgers could put together 3 more quarters of the level we just talked about, we'll be fine. I don't think we'll be talking about a Padres team that can compete with that. You look around. I mean, the Padres have the second best record in the National League. The Mets are third. The Mets have an 8-game lead on the division. So, as you said, you'd love to be in that situation where everybody else in your division is under 500. Unfortunately, the Dodgers are not in that spot. But here's the plan for today's show. We're going to talk Max Muncy. I know after Sunday's loss, both offensively and defensively, he's kind of the guy that when I look through my mentions, he's the one that's dominating those. So we're going to talk Max Muncy. We're going to talk buying and selling, looking at some guys who are trending in the right direction, maybe trending in the wrong direction. We'll talk Mookie Betts, Walker Buehler. Fabian Ardaya had a great piece on The Athletic talking about his fastball velocity, spin rate, and how people are teeing off on his fastball. So we'll get into that a little bit. We'll talk about odds and ends, random stories. Blake Treinen gets an extension. Michael Grove, Ryan Pepio make their major league debuts. And then we'll close with a mailbag. Gavin Lux is a question, trade deadline question. So lots to get to. But let's start with Max Muncy. This is a guy who obviously has turned his career around as a Dodger. We know that at the end of last season, it ends with an injury. He decides not to get surgery, thinks he can doesn't need Tommy John surgery, I believe is what he would have needed, right? But decides because he's a position player, doesn't need it. He's been really, really rough so far this season. The irony to me is that I sat here, the last 3 or 4 shows we did and said I was way more worried about Justin Turner than I was to Max Muncy. Max Muncy has not turned it around. Justin Turner has. I even traded for him in our fantasy league. Never saw that day coming for myself. But here's Muncy. He blows Sunday's game. He's struggled on defense. Baseball Savant has him in the 37th percentile for outs above average, so defensive metric there. He has the best walk rate in the league. He's in the 100th percentile. He's in the 99th percentile for chase rate. He's barreling the ball up all right, 79th percentile there, but man, 23rd percentile for exit velocity, 36th percentile for hard hit percentage, and 6th percentile for expected batting average. League average strikeout rate and whiff rate. The line is 156, 331 on base percentage, 279 slugging percentage, with just 3 home runs in 154 plate appearances. What do you make of Muncie right now? I mean, obviously, we can all see the struggles. Like, are there reasons for optimism or more reasons for pessimism in your mind, Daniel?
I mean, there's probably a little bit for both. I'd say, I mean, the walk rate is still up. So that's, if you're going to be optimistic, at least there's that. Like, at least he still has a pretty good, eye of the plate, knows what's a strike and whatnot. The problem is he's not really hitting the strikes and he's not making mistakes the same way he, Max Muncy the last 4 years did. So there definitely is cause for concern. Like, we're sitting here, we're about to hit Memorial Day weekend here. Like, it's no longer, I feel like that's cut off for me, where it's like before that it's still early, everything's fine, and then after that it's like, all right, like, let's go now. So I think with him though, I think a lot of it is like kind of mental struggles. Like, I don't know if it's the injury. I don't know if it's just because he got off to a slow start. I don't know if it's because he's moving around defensively, which he's not quite used to. So I don't know. Could be a combination of all those things. Like, he's being asked to do a lot. Let's be honest here. Like, I know he has played second, he has played third, but first base is his primary position. And obviously, when you like Freddie Freeman, like, you don't even think twice about that. Like, you'll figure the rest out. And I'd say overall defensively, he's been fine. Like, he hasn't been great by any means, but outside of that error yesterday, like, there hasn't been anything catastrophic or anything. So to me, I just think he's in his head a lot at the plate. Sometimes, I know I just mentioned the walk rate might be a positive sign, but at the same time, if you're just going up there looking for walks, you're probably not going to get many hits, and that could be what's happening. So we talked about this a few weeks ago, and he should be moved down in the lineup. Somehow that still has not happened. Like, he's still in there batting 4th or 5th most days, coming up in big spots and not able to come through. So I think it's way past time to move him down. Like, put him in the 7 or 8 spot. Maybe that takes a little pressure off him. Like, necessarily feel like he has to be the guy to come through every time. But I definitely think there's, cause for concern at this point. We're sitting here, like I said, Memorial Day's right coming up this weekend, and you put out the numbers. Like, it's not like those are bad numbers. Those are like he's not slugging anything right now, and he's a home run hitter. So there's definitely some, cause for concern at least.
Yeah, the 279 slugging percentage is not what we want to see. And look, I mean, so basically for the season, his OPS is around 610. It's 635 for the last 2 weeks. So it's not like he's really trending in the right direction. He has no home runs the last 2 weeks. He has 13 strikeouts and 40 at bats. So he's striking out about a third of the time over the last 2 weeks. And it has to be mental for my estimation because of what I see. Like, he's watching fastballs go right down the middle. And I think you make a great point, and I think this is where I want to have as much sort of empathy and sort of patience with Max Muncy as possible. He's coming off of an injury, which is one piece. Now he's trying to play second base. He's trying to play third base. I think we take for granted guys like Chris Taylor who can seemingly play everywhere and not be affected at the plate. Now, obviously, this year he struggled, but we know it's not because he's moving around. He's not moving around for the first time in his career. Maybe that's messing with him the other way. But for Muncy, it's like to be able to be thinking about second base and move, where am I standing? Where's my positioning, batter to batter? Then third base. That's a very different throw from second base to third base. There's a ton of different angles. You're trying to turn a double play in one spot, whatever. On top of that, he's not playing good defensively. Like, as I said, 37th percentile and outs above average. And so that's probably getting in his head of, I just messed up in the field. I'm below average there. I need to step up. I need to be better at the plate. And then he gets to the plate and he's a mess there. So I look at the combination of that, and it's just a recipe for disaster, which leads to the obvious question here, which is, what would you do with Max Muncy, Daniel? Like, is it just as simple as you mentioned, moving him down the lineup and leaving him in every day? Do you sort of give him a phantom IL stint and say, hey, take a couple weeks, like, get your head right, check out the elbow, maybe see if we need to do something there, and give some other guys opportunities? Like, how would you handle the Muncy situation moving forward?
I think I'd probably give him like a couple days off. Like, maybe, what are they playing, 3 games against the Nationals this week? Say you're going to be out of the lineup this full series, like, have a chance to kind of reset and regroup here. I don't think they need to do an IL thing unless he's actually hurt. Obviously, that would change things, but we have no inkling of that at all.
Yeah.
So, I would sit him down for a few days, let him regroup. Obviously, I'd say he had the whole season, but yesterday was kind of like the pinnacle, right? Like as bad as he had been this season, he hadn't really like cost the team any games, and I know he's not the sole reason they lost yesterday, but when it comes down to what it came down to, and
It's about as close to being the
Yeah.
sole reason a team loses a game as possible.
Exactly. So I would give him a few days here, and then obviously you got Edwin Rios has been swinging the bat really well. You just mentioned Justin Turner's been swinging it better, so you got guys who could still be in the lineup, and you'll be fine. So I'd give him a couple days that I'd put their bat him 7th or 8th or whatever. Even if maybe you got to DH him for a couple days, that's fine too. Like you got Justin Turner who could play third, Edwin Rios could play third, Gavin Lux could play second. So you got those positions covered. Hunter Alberto is another guy against lefties that you could throw in there. So you got options. So I'd give him a few days, and see how it goes from there. I don't think like the team is still winning games despite his struggles. So I don't think you need to do anything drastic. But if you could do little things to kind of get him back on track, I think that would be beneficial.
Yeah, for me, I'm not sure I'd go immediately, only because I don't know if giving him a few days off right after the big error, does that get him even more in his head? Like maybe let him play a couple normal games and then sit him out after that. But yeah, I mean, you say on one hand, the Dodgers have options. We could talk a little bit about a guy like Austin Barnes, who has been swinging the bat well, and you can move Will Smith into the DH spot. Like that's an option because, I mean, Alberto's been fine. I mean, he's not like a guy that's just seemingly earning more playing time, whereas Edwin Rios is. And again, you can make the case that Austin Barnes is as well. And so finding a way. But I'm with you. I just think it needs a break. It needs a mental reset. Like we need to just do something to break the where we're headed, because it does feel like he's in his head when a guy with an eye like him is watching fastballs go right down the middle, which is not a new phenomenon. This is something that has been happening for a few weeks. It feels like something has to change. And again, the pinnacle was yesterday. The Dodgers have a 1-run lead in the bottom of the 10th with 2 outs, a routine ground ball to the second baseman where Max Muncy is standing, and he just completely misses it. Goes between his legs. Both runs scored. The Dodgers lose. It's a brutal feeling. I mean, I just feel for the guy because obviously Muncy, he cares more than any of us do sitting on our couch. He has to wear that more than any of us do. And look, the last thing I would say is the Dodgers are a half game up in the division. Last year, they lost the division by 1 game. And so I don't think necessarily you can be like, whatever, these games don't really mean anything. Let's just continue. You have to treat these games not like they're do or die, but like they do matter. And so I'll be fascinated to see. I think at the very least, we agree on he needs to not be hitting in the top 2/3 of the order. He needs to be in the 7th, 8th, or 9th holes. I mean, let him bat 9th. Like, let him draw walks in the 9 hole and then get on base for Mookie Betts and guys like that ahead of him. And then for me, if that doesn't work in the series against Washington, then I would say, hey, we're going to give you a few days, or we're going to, rosters are about to constrict a little bit at the end of the month as well. And so maybe that's when you do an IL stint and say, hey, take the 10 days, clear your head, be away from baseball for a little bit or whatever, or go down to, camp somewhere and work on your swing. I don't know what it looks like, but some tough stuff for Muncie there. So let's shift gears. Let's go into a segment we like to call buying or selling. And it's basically looking at guys who are on hot streaks or on cold streaks and saying, Daniel, are you buying or selling these different people? Let's start with the guy who's on a hot streak, who deserves all the recognition he's getting. It's Mookie Betts. It's the guy on the wall right behind you making an unbelievable catch. The last 2 weeks for Mookie Betts, batting .304, .371 on-base percentage, .625 slugging percentage, 4 home runs, 13 runs, 10 RBIs. He's been an absolute tear. I imagine this is an easy buy for you, but what have you seen from Mookie Betts of late?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an easy spot. He's been phenomenal. He's been going to all fields, which has been good to see. We know he's got power to left, and we're seeing that. He's hit like 3 home runs or 4 home runs in the last week, which is great to see. But he's been getting his base hits to right. He's been being that table setter that you expect Mookie to be at the top of the lineup, and when he's going well, like a whole team could kind of just follow, and you see like. And I don't have the exact numbers, but in games when he scores a run or something, the Dodgers record is just insane. And that's over the 3 years, like since he's come to the Dodgers, like in games he scores a run, the team basically wins. So if he could be that table setter at the top, obviously you got Freddie, Trey, all those guys right behind him. So if he gets on base, he's going to score more often than not. So I think that's what we've been. And also he's been, getting it done defensively
Yeah.
too. He's making some incredible throws. So right now he's playing at an MVP level. I don't necessarily expect him to stay this hot at the plate all season, but he has that he's an elite player, and that's what we're seeing right now. Like, he got off to a slow start the first couple weeks, but since then he's been one of the best players in baseball, and you could see the Dodgers come and go with him.
Yeah, and I short sold him, by the way. He's got 5 home runs in the last 14 days, and you look at the last week, he's got 3 home runs, 11 runs, 7 RBIs, and an OPS over 1,200 for the last 7 days. So you love to see that from Mookie Betts. Obviously, you look at his season numbers, they're starting to come back to where you are. I mean, he's hitting 273, a 362 on-base percentage, and a 526 slugging percentage. So you're talking about a guy with an OPS that's right around 900. He's got 10 home runs on the season. Again, we're a quarter of the way through the year. So if you project that out and say Mookie Betts is going to get you 35 to 40 home runs with an OPS of 900 and playing the elite defense that you're seeing out there, I mean, that is the very definition of an MVP.
150 runs too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think he's on pace for 160 runs.
Yeah, he's scoring a run a game right now, basically.
Yeah, I mean, he is right now. I mean, this is crazy. He is second in the National League in wins above replacement, according to Fangraphs right now. Only Manny Machado is higher. Manny Machado, by the way, his numbers are absurd. He's got a 3.5 wins above replacement, which is 0.6 higher than anybody else in baseball. Mookie Betts is 2.2, so he's 1.3 behind. But he's, like I said, I mean, he's second in the National League. You go down that list, 4 or 5 names in the National League, and Freddie Freeman's right there as well with 1.8 wins above replacement. So a nice little duo there for the Dodgers. And that brings us to another guy that's at the top of that order, which is Trey Turner. Kind of a guy that has flown under the radar in many ways, but you look at his numbers over the last couple weeks, he's starting to pick things up. 315 batting average, 406 on base percentage, 463 slugging percentage over the last couple of weeks. And again, I think those numbers might not actually include, I might have looked this up before yesterday. Yeah, so 364 batting average, 438 on base, 527 slugging percentage, home run, 7 runs, 9 RBIs, and 4 steals for Trey Turner the last couple of weeks. Again, the stories that have come out about him, by the way, I don't know if you've read any of these, but he's played with a broken finger basically twice, and he just adjusted his batting position on the fly. It's incredible stuff, but good to see. I mean, Mookie Betts gets going, Trey Turner gets going, Freddie Freeman has been there. I mean, that's what we've all been waiting to see.
Exactly, and that's why I think we've seen kind of the offense has kind of started to carry them over the last week or two with we mentioned the pitchers that are out. We mentioned how they're playing every single day. The bullpen's taxed. Like, this has kind of been the time where it's like, all right, here that all-star lineup needs to go, and it really has, and it's because of the two guys. You just named Mookie and Trey. Those, I mean, obviously their speed, we don't need to say anything. Like, everyone knows how fast they are. So like anytime either of those guys get on base, there's a good chance they're going to score. Trey Turner, he won the batting title here, so he had that when you see him get off to a slow start, you're not overly concerned. Like, you might be concerned about the lack of power. Like, I think he only has 3 home runs, but the base hits are going to be there. He's going to be on base, wreaking havoc, stealing bases. That's a dynamic player that you could stick right there in the middle of your order. He's a guy who's in a contract year, so he's got as much motivation as possible. He sees what the shortstops all got last year. He wants something in that neighborhood too, so he's got to have a big year this year, and we're starting to kind of see that come around. And it's been much needed in this time. Like, I think I said like a week ago, like, now is the time for offense to really kind of step it up, and they have to their credit.
Yeah, and looking at Trey Turner, I mean, his Baseball Savant page, so he's in the 89th percentile for exit velocity. 91.7 is the average exit velocity. That would be a career high for Trey Turner. So it's not a matter of, is he hitting the ball hard? It's a launch angle problem. So his average launch angle is 6.2, which is about 5 less than it was last year. His career average, the league average is 12. And so he's hitting the ball hard. He's just not getting it in the air. And he's talked about he's working on trying to get the ball up. He puts backspin on the ball that helps it carry. But you look across his numbers, I mean, they're really good. 94th percentile in hard hit percentage, 86th percentile in expected batting average, obviously 99th percentile in sprint speed. The defense has not been great. Max Muncy, we talked about 37th percentile in outs above average. Trey Turner is the first percentile, so one of the worst defenders in all of baseball, according to this metric. No defensive metric is perfect, so I'll put that caveat in there. But we're both buying the Mookie stock. We're both buying Trey Turner stock. These are not guys. These are not fads. We have seen these guys do what they are doing right now for entire seasons, for multiple seasons in a row. So it's nice to see those things headed in that direction. A couple other guys just of note real quick. Freddie Freeman has continued to be great. He's hitting 302 over the last couple weeks. Justin Turner, the turnaround, he's hitting 283 with a 609 slugging percentage. He has 17 RBIs in the last 2 weeks. Remarkable stuff. Will Smith, OPS around 900, 2 home runs for him as well. Austin Barnes, of course, the greatest hitter in the history of baseball, continues to be hot for the Dodgers. In addition to Muncie, though, there is one other guy just briefly on the sort of buying or selling on the low side. Chris Taylor continues to struggle his last 2 weeks, 46 at-bats, 19 strikeouts, an OPS of 617. That is, by the way, worse than Max Muncy's OPS over the last 2 weeks. Are you seeing anything from Chris Taylor that makes you believe that this funk is towards the end of it?
I mean, not necessarily towards the end of it, but I think we've seen him in similar funks. Like, you look at the second half of last season, he was pretty bad, and then he actually ended up having a really good postseason. You know, these slumps are going to happen, especially a guy like him who, even when he's going well, like, the swing and miss is still there. Like, he's a guy who's always struck out a lot. I'd say right now his whiff rate and his swing and miss, it's as high as it's ever been. So definitely cause for concern. But it's a long season. You're going to go through these, different stretches. He's another guy who is kind of at the bottom of the order, so there's not like a ton of pressure on him. But I think we've seen it with him that he'll go into balls and then he'll come out of it and he'll be red hot. So I'm not too concerned about him, especially when we just talked about 3 or 4 other guys that are all hitting really well right now.
Yeah. Okay, so just to recap the hitters before we move on to a few pitchers. Mookie Betts, as far as do we believe that what he's doing right now is sustainable and going to improve, we're both buying that. Trey Turner, same question, we're both buying that. One guy I didn't specifically ask you about, but I will now. Justin Turner struggled mightily for a while, now seems to have figured it out. Are you buying the recent surge of, yes, okay, the early season stuff was a fluke and this is the real Justin Turner?
Yeah, I mean, in the early season stuff, like, the only reason there was cause for concern is because of his age. Like, we know Justin Turner is historically a slow starter. Like, it's happened time and time again. But we thought maybe this year was different just because he's, 37, 38 years old, whatever. We thought maybe, Father Time's finally catching up with him. But who knows? Like, maybe this is just another case of a slow start for Justin Turner. He's been DHing a lot, I'd say, so maybe that has actually helped him get going at the plate. So who knows? I don't know if that'll continue. We just had the Muncie conversation. Maybe Justin Turner ends up playing more third base if Muncie's out of the lineup more often. But hey, he's swinging it well right now. Like you said, 10 RBIs in 2 weeks. Like, that's pretty. You'll take that all day long. So I don't know if I'm really saying he's back to being all-star Justin Turner. I don't think I'd go that far. But I'm definitely buying that he could be a productive, or like batting 5th or 6th in that lineup or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm buying it. Like, it's like you said, the age was the concern for me, and so you put together a stretch like this, and that answers the only question that I need answering. Yeah. As I said, I went out and got him in fantasy baseball because I needed some infield help, and so there we go. I mean, the OPS of almost 1,000 over the last couple weeks is good to see. Chris Taylor, I'm in a hold position on Chris Taylor. I have not seen anything that makes me believe that he's about to turn this around. At least he's at the bottom of the lineup, so you don't have to see it all that much. Let's talk on the pitching side. Let's talk Walker Buehler. It's a guy that always feels like he's part of the conversation. Fabian Ardaya did a piece that was great on The Athletic, just breaking down sort of the metrics of Buehler's pitches, specifically his fastball. And I'm going to ask you, Daniel, ultimately whether you have cause for concern, but here's kind of the crux of what Ardaya wrote. His spin rate on his fastball is down 140 RPMs from last season, which was down 140 RPMs from the season before that. He's in the 72nd percentile for spin rate. Now, one of the reasons that's a big deal is his velocity is also down. It was down a mile and a half an hour last year. It's down again this year. And this is the big one, the vertical drop of his fastball. So one of the reasons his fastball had been so effective was it seemed to rise. It didn't drop nearly as much. Well, now it's dropping 13.4 inches. That is 4.5 inches more than last year, which was 1.5 inches more than it was the year before. So in 2 years, his fastball drop has increased by 6 inches. leading to, on his fastball, hitters are now hitting 365 and slugging 596. He has a 36% strikeout rate. And this is what a quote that scared me. He said, "My fastball isn't quite what it was." This is a 27-year-old guy. Your fastball should not be diminishing the way that it is diminishing for Walker Buehler. We know the stats, the ERA has remained good. He's sort of become more of a pitcher than a thrower. Where are you at on Walker Buehler? Like, does any of this concern you?
I think it concerns me in the sense that, like you said, or like he said, he doesn't have the stuff that he once had, which was like top stuff in baseball. So I don't think it concerns me in the sense that, like, oh no, he's going to be awful moving forward. Yeah. But it might concern me in the sense that, you know, maybe he won't be a top 5 guy, which that's totally fine. Like, he doesn't need to be on that level. But like what used to make, you know, first Walker Buehler was he could reach back and throw that fastball by just about anyone. Like, I remember that one start he had against the Braves. I think it was the 2020 postseason where, you know, the bases ended up loaded with no outs, and he just said, "Screw it, I'm just fastballs by guys," and he like strikes 2 guys out, gets a ground ball, and he's out of the inning. So I don't necessarily think, you know, what the numbers show is he can't necessarily do that anymore. Like, he's not throwing as hard. You mentioned the spin rate, you know, the lack of vertical movement now. You know, that fastball is just an easier pitch to hit, and the numbers have reflected it. So that doesn't mean, you know, he's kind of reinvented himself like that. He's been throwing his off-speed stuff more. He's thrown his cutter a lot more, and that cutter's actually been really good this year. So he's kind of reinvented himself, like you said, like he's more of a pitcher instead of a thrower, which I think that's a good thing. Like, that's, as you develop as a pitcher, that's what you want. But at the same time, you also want to have 97, 98 whenever you need it, just to have that. So there is a little concern. But at the same time, like, I understand it's a long season here. Like, he's not going to go out there and give max effort every single pitch of every single start. Like, he's a guy that, frankly, right now, we need him healthy. Like, we need him out there every 5th day taking the ball, you know, with all the other injuries in this rotation right now. So if I don't know if, you know, if he doesn't still have the 97, 98 in him, I'd say that would be definitely more cause for concern. But maybe he's just kind of saving it, and we'll see it later in the. But who knows? Obviously, we got a long way to go before October, which is ultimately when we're going to need him to be at his best. And you know, traditionally that's when he has been at his best. So we'll see. But I definitely think, you know, the numbers you mentioned, those are not, you know, small changes. You know, he's definitely his fastball is definitely not what it used to be.
Yeah, and I mean, I am concerned because I sense concern in his voice when I'm reading this. Now, obviously, you have to read into it. I'm reading pages, you know, words on a page. But to clean one thing up, he's in the 36th percentile for strikeout rate. So, you know, bottom third of the league when it comes to strikeouts, which is not something you think of with Walker Buehler. But I hear him saying, my fastball isn't quite what it was. And I'm like, that's a problem because that was your calling card. Now, he's a pitch mix guy. As you said, the cutter has been a much bigger part of his story of late. And the results are still there. And so I am not selling Walker Buehler. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm buying. I'm kind of in a hold position for the same reason. And one of the biggest reasons, you and I sat here a year ago, and we're having basically this exact same conversation, which was all the metrics are not good, but his ERA is good. And I was like, is the regression coming? Is the regression coming? Well, guess what? The regression didn't come. The metrics got better.
Picked it up, yeah.
Yeah, and so I have no reason to believe that's not going to happen. I am going to look to history and say, as you said, I don't know if Walker Buehler is firing on all cylinders, if he's trying to fire on all cylinders. He hints at that there's like an arm angle thing that he's like, I should be able to do all of the things I want to do right now. I can't. But again, if the worst version of you is a 2.9 ERA guy that has pretty average to mediocre metrics, and then you can figure out the metrics, I'll take it. So interesting stuff, because again, you look at the numbers, you're like, what are we even talking about? But it's the underlying stuff with Buehler that is sort of can be cause for concern. 2 more pitchers I want to mention here in buying and selling. The next one is Tony Gonslin. This is, you know, I've been driving the Tony Gonslin bandwagon. I've been a fan of, and it's great. Another guy I tried to trade for in fantasy, couldn't get before the stock went too high. But 39 innings pitched this season, a 1.62 ERA, a fielding independent pitching, a FIP of 3.51, which tells you that it's not all smoke and mirrors. A WHIP of under 1, 0.97 WHIP. The strikeout rate isn't great, 60th percentile. The walk rate is a problem, 27th percentile. But man, you look at some of these metrics. He's in the 98th percentile in hard hit percentage, 90th percentile or higher in all of his expected numbers, batting average, on-base percentage, slugging percentage, etc. 81st percentile exit velocity, 84th percentile barrels. Are you buying Tony Gonslin as a guy that is a legit, we're not talking about a number 5 starter. This is a guy that I'm not going to say he's a number 1 starter, but he definitely looks like either a really, really, really good number 4 starter or an average to above average number 3 starter.
Yeah, I'm buying. I think he's been great this year, and I think his key or the biggest change with him is that he's been a lot more efficient. Like, he's been a guy who, if you look at the numbers as far as run prevention goes, like, he's always been really good. It's just been a case of he couldn't really go deep into games, and I think that's kind of the change we've been. So, some of it's been because out of necessity. Like, we know they're playing every day, in this stretch right here, that, their bullpen's taxed. They got a lot of injuries. So they've kind of needed him to go deeper into games. And to his credit, he's answered the call. He's gone 6 innings of his last 2 starts. That's literally the first time in his major league career that he's gone 6 innings in back-to-back starts. So I think that's been the biggest key. Like, we knew he was a guy that you could throw out there for 3 or 4 innings and he was going to, hold them to 1 or 2 runs. Now he's giving you 5 or 6 innings and doing that. So that's great to see. I think you mentioned the walk rate. That you'd like to see that be a little lower, but we know he's kind of always been a bit of an erratic guy. But hey, the splitter's been looking great. That's his go-to pitch. So hopefully he could keep this up. Hopefully he could stay healthy. He's dealt with some issues in the past as far as health goes. But yeah, right now I'm definitely buying him as like a number 2 or number 3 starter, which when that guy's your 4th starter, that you're in a good spot.
Yeah, and I mean, the walk rate is better than it was last year if you want to be optimistic. As I said, it's still bottom 3rd of the league. Last year, it was bottom 3% of the league. But I think that's the biggest thing for him. His strikeout rate has remained pretty consistent where he's fine. Like, he's 60th percentile for strikeout rate, so he's not going to be one of the elite strikeout guys. But if he can limit the walks a little bit, that's where you get your efficiency from. Like, clearly guys have never been able to barrel him up in effective ways. The exit velocity has always been pretty good for him. The hard hit rate has always been pretty good for him. As you said, he's limited runs in part because even if he's gotten himself into trouble, he very rarely is guys are barreling him up. And so I'm buying it with Tony Gonsolin. As you said, the run prevention has always been there. It's sort of the same thing with Walker Buehler. Like, he was always preventing runs, but were some of the underlying metrics concerning? With Gonsolin, the eye test always passed the eye test for me. And so it's nice for him, encouraged for him to be able to see those results, and good for him. Because as you said, the Dodgers needed the length. He gave them 6 innings yesterday, and good stuff there. Okay, last pitcher I want to give you buying or selling, Evan Phillips. Evan Phillips, relief pitcher, obviously a guy that, many people were like, is he going to be with the Dodgers? He's out of options, etc., etc. 16 innings pitched. In 16 appearances, he has allowed 0 earned runs in 14 of the 16. He's got a 2.81 ERA, a FIP of 2.35, 5-1 strikeout to walk ratio. You look at his StatCast, everything is red. All of the numbers are above average. 97th percentile hard hit rate, 97th percentile expected batting average. Top 7% in all expected numbers, 89th percentile for strikeout rate, 85th percentile for exit velocity. Are you buying or selling Evan Phillips as a guy that, as Justin Lorber, he's a guy that I would say if I might be in the passenger seat on the Evan Phillips bandwagon. I think Justin is driving that one, but high leverage reliever Evan Phillips, buying or selling?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you're not buying it when you just, read off all the numbers you did. Like, he's been elite in every sense of the word, and he's been a guy who's, quite frankly, like, he's been for his job just about every time he takes the mound. Like, he has no minor league options. He makes the opening day roster, and we're just kind of sitting there like, all right, like, how long is this going to last? We know some injured relievers are, coming back at some point. We know they got a lot of depth, at the minor league levels. If he, let's say in April, he had like 3 or 4 bad outings in a row, he very well could have been gone. So he's definitely been pitching for his job, and he's looked like it. He's gone out there. He's been attacking hitters. His velocity's been up. Like, he was throwing like 98 yesterday. I don't think anyone came into the year thinking like, hey, Evan Phillips, 98. So to his credit, he worked really hard in the offseason. If I had to guess, I don't know that for a fact, but he's been great. I'm with you. I'd say I'm in the passenger seat. Like, exactly. driving the Evan Phillips for closer bandwagon or anything like that. But look, if you look at the bullpen right now, they're missing a lot of key guys. We'll get to Blake Treinen. He's out right now. Tommy Kahnle just went down. So they needed guys to step into the higher leverage type roles, like Daniel Hudson and Craig Kimbrell cannot throw every single day. So I think we'll see games, especially right now in this time where they don't have any off days. We're going to see games like yesterday where, ideally in game, you're going to, Daniel Hudson and Craig Kimbrell in the last 2 innings to close it out. But yesterday they had to go to Justin Brule, Yency Almonte, Evan Phillips, all these guys. And for the most part, they all got the job done. So those guys. But yeah, I definitely think Evan Phillips is a guy who has kind of moved past the audition stage or whatever, and now he's kind of firmly planted in that bullpen. And if you need him in a game like yesterday for high leverage, he showed, even though the results didn't, the Dodgers end up losing the game, but in my opinion, he got the job done yesterday.
Yeah, I texted Justin immediately. It was like, I felt mostly bad for Phillips because, that would have been a save opportunity, kind of like, and obviously I'm not saying he was perfect in that inning, but a bummer for him. I just looking up his contract. He's under team control through 2026. He has not even entered arbitration. Next year, he will not be in arbitration. So shout out to Andrew Friedman for finding a guy that they're basically going to get for the minimum for 5 years, essentially, and get ridiculous production from him.
He was with the Reds just before the Dodgers too, so I don't know how they let him go. Usually they're the guy that keep those guys.
Totally. All right, so we're buying Phillips, we're buying Gonslin. I'm holding on Buehler. It sounds like you're buying the sort of the production to continue for Walker Buehler.
I'm buying that he's still going to be good, but not necessarily a Cy Young guy. If that makes sense.
Best pitcher on the Dodgers still.
Right. Well, it was Kershaw until he got hurt. Like,
Fair.
if you look at how Kershaw was pitching, it was incredible. But obviously now we don't know exactly when he's going to be back. So I'll still put Buehler slightly ahead of Julio.
Okay. There we go. I like it. All right, let's.
You got Gonslin number 1 right now?
No. I'm not getting there yet. No, not quite. Julio's been good, 2.63 ERA. So I suppose, if there was somebody out there that wanted to make a case for Julio being the best pitcher on the Dodgers, I don't know who that guy would be, but his ERA is even better than Walker Buehler. The metrics are a little bit better as well. So but that's neither here nor there. So we'll let the sample size play out on that one a little bit. Okay, let's get to some odds and ends, some fun sort of storyline bits. To get through. We got Blake Treinen extension. We got a couple guys making their debut. Pedro Baez is back. Some injury updates. So let's just fire through these. The biggest storyline, I think, as far as a news item is Blake Treinen gets an extension. You might be thinking, hey, great news. Dodgers' best relief pitcher signs an extension. Could be, with the Dodgers through the 2024 season as a result of this. I texted you and I texted my brother. My brother's immediate response was, oh, so he's out for the year, basically. And I was like, oh, you know what? I had not thought about that piece of the storyline. It comes out, basically, here are the details. Essentially, they had a club option for $8 million on Treinen for next season. The Dodgers have essentially picked that up in exchange for adding an additional club option year for 2024, the salary of which is entirely based on time played. They could get out of that, but I think it could be as low as $1 million or as high as $8 million, something like that, depending on how much time is missed between now and then. They have updated saying he is out for a while, but they just moved him to the 60-day IL, but, quote, a decent chance that he is back at some point this season. It feels like the Tommy Kahnle, Jimmy Nelson type of deal where you sign a guy to a 2-year deal knowing he's going to miss a lot of the first year. But what do you make of sort of the mystery surrounding Blake Treinen and the contract extension?
Yeah, so to me, it kind of came down to like what the terms of the deal were. Like when I first saw that they agreed to an extension, I thought the opposite at first. I was like, oh, like that must mean they're not too concerned about his health. Like they're willing to commit to him for another year or two. They must feel pretty good about where he's at and that he's not going to need like a significant, let's say he ends up needing shoulder surgery or something. That means he'll probably miss all of next year as well. So at first I was like, all right, this is good news. But then when you see the terms come out and it's basically they just, picked up the team option and tacked on another year. It was a very team-friendly extension, I'd say. So that is kind of when I flipped this, like, oh no, like maybe he's, this is worse than they actually thought, and he just wanted to try to get like as much security as possible. So that's kind of where I stand now, I'd say. What you just said, like there's a decent chance that he's gonna that doesn't give me a ton of confidence, I should say. Like,
Yeah.
so I guess we're just kind of in wait and see mode. Like I know for a fact Dave Roberts said that he's not going to be back until like the home stretch at the very earliest. So that would maybe mean like August, September. And that's what they're like. If they're aiming for that, that means there's really no margin for error. Like he can't really have any setbacks or anything. Like they didn't have surgery or anything. So they're just kind of waiting and see how the arm responds to time off and treatment and such. So with Blake Treinen, I think it's good that they at least locked him down for a couple more years, unless he has to have shoulder surgery. But
Yeah.
hey, when he's healthy, I don't think it's really a question that he's the best reliever the Dodgers have. He's not too like he's not. It's not like they're signing a 40-year-old to a 2-year extension. He's kind of mid 30s. So I definitely think they'll get some good years out of him as long as this shoulder thing sorts itself out. But as far as this season goes, we'll see. It's good that other guys are kind of right now in his absence. But I mean, that's a guy who, if we're sitting here before October and we're listing the Dodgers bullpen arms in order of importance, as he's shown the last 2 postseasons, like I think he's number 1.
Yeah. 33. We'll turn 34 in June. It's interesting because you make a great point. Like if the Dodgers were super concerned about his shoulder surgery, like you probably don't pick up the club option for next year because you're paying him $8 million. Yeah. So even if that turns into a $1 million extension, for the following year, that's a pretty hefty risk for a guy that will be, 35, 36 that next year and coming off of shoulder surgery. But yeah, it's just a fascinating because even the shoulder thing, they did imaging. There's no structural damage. Like it's not like they even can do surgery seemingly because there's nothing to repair. It's just inflammation. Right. And so we'll have to wait and see. But you kind of hint at the question that I want to get at here, which is, are you concerned then about the Dodgers bullpen with a guy like Treinen out? We just talked about Evan Phillips. Obviously, Craig Kimbrell is a guy that we haven't spent a ton of time talking about, but has actually been pretty good. A 3.00 ERA, 2.34 FIP. Strikeout rate is down to what would be a career low, but the walk rate is down as well. He's the top 10 percentile in hard hit, expected weighted on-base average, batting average, strikeout percentage, whiff rate, etc. So who steps up? Like, how do you feel about the Dodger bullpen? We've talked a lot about how unbelievable the Dodger bullpen has been. If Treinen, let's just say he's out for a significant amount of time, are you concerned about the state of the Dodger bullpen moving forward?
I wouldn't say concerned. I think we still need to see how the next couple months play out here. I think they got a lot of different options. It's just kind of a matter of who's going to step up and really take that role. Like you just mentioned, Kimbrell. We know he's the closer. He's been solid. Probably going to get even better, I'd say. I still feel like he's just kind of ramping up. Like he barely threw in spring training. He's thrown like once a week, like for a majority of the season. Like I feel like he's still ramping up. So I think he's going to be even better as the season goes along. We just talked about Evan Phillips. He's kind of entering his name in that picture. Daniel Hudson, is a guy who's been really good, and he's gonna kind of have to move into that fireman role as we kind of have seen the last week or so. Big spots in the 7th, 8th inning, the guy that Dave Roberts goes to, whereas it would have been Blake Treinen. But another guy who we've been waiting for a while now to see them kind of step up is Brusdar Graterol. Like we know he's got the great stuff. We know how hard he throws. And look, he just had a great outing. It was yesterday, the day before. He threw 2 shutout innings. I think it was when they had the bullpen game. It was Saturday. So he's starting to look better. Like I still think we all want him to miss more bats with the stuff he has. So he's still, I guess, got some to do. But we've been kind of waiting to see him step up into that role. Phil Bickford, a guy kind of like Kimbrell, he was kind of, he was injured at the beginning of the year, slow played a little bit. So he's just kind of getting better and better and better. So they got options there. And then, on the left side, they got Vesia. Brule is the guy who has really not looked good the last couple outings. He's kind of been all over the place. But they got options. It's just a matter, we got to see who's going to stay healthy. We got to see who's coming back. Like Tommy Kahnle just again. He was a guy that you were kind of hoping would become like a leverage type guy.
Yeah.
So we'll see when he's back. And Caleb Ferguson is another guy who got called up, throws one out and gets sent back down. But you eventually think he's going to, figure into the picture as well. They got a lot of options. It's just kind of a matter of who emerges and who doesn't. And hey, if enough of those guys don't emerge by the time the trade deadline comes around, then that's an area you need to address, especially if by then you'll have a more clearer picture on Treinen as well.
Yeah, and I mean, so we're entering, a couple weeks away, I think 1 or 2 weeks away from the Dodgers having to come down to 26 guys on the roster, 13 pitchers, so 8 relief pitchers. So let me give you sort of the guys that they could put together a bullpen of right now, and you tell me if this is a group that you feel good about or if you feel like this is a group that's going to need some change. So obviously you've got Kimbrel and Hudson at the back end. You've got Phillips, Vesia, and Gratterall as well. So there's probably your top 5. And by the way, Vesia has been great this season. 12 strikeouts per 9 innings, a 2.25 ERA. His FIP is 1.18. So he has been fantastic. Phillips, we talked about. Hudson, 2.57 ERA on the season. So he's been very good. So you've got those 5. And then from there, you kind of put together Phil Bickford, 15 appearances. His wins above replacement. Fangraphs does not love Phil Bickford. Maybe it's the low strikeout rate, but he's got a 3.29 ERA. You've got guys like Clevenger, Almonte, Maranta, Mitch White out of the bullpen, Justin Brule, who you mentioned, Caleb Ferguson, David Price is another guy who has been okay. Again, fielding independent pitching doesn't love David Price, but I mean, I'm looking at that top 5. And if I said going into the postseason, your top 5 relief pitchers were going to be Kimbrel, Hudson, Phillips, Vesia, and Gratterall. Is that a good enough bullpen for you for a team with the aspirations that the Dodgers have, or would that become a high priority? We need to go do something here.
I'd say if all of your starters are healthy, like if you're going into the postseason with a top 4 of Buehler, Kershaw, Julio, take your pick. Gonslin is who it would be right now. Who knows? Andrew Heaney, if he gets back, who knows? But if you have a solid 4 rotation like that, then I think you're fine with that bullpen. But it's if Kershaw's out, if Heaney's out, like if you start missing starters, you're getting less length out of the guys that are replacing them. That's when I think you would probably need 1 or 2 more bullpen pieces. Another name that we haven't mentioned is Danny Duffy. He's expected back mid-season at some point, so maybe there's another arm for your bullpen. He might kind of develop a multi-inning type guy. So there's another option as well. I think you mentioned Yency Almonte. He's a guy who's actually looked pretty good, in his short time with the Dodgers. I don't know. I wouldn't exactly count on him for leverage just yet, but the last guys in your bullpen, that's not the worst thing. So I definitely think, and this is a conversation we've kind of been having for a couple of years now, I think there's good volume in the bullpen. You got a lot of quality arms, but without Treinen, you don't necessarily have that, top 5. And who knows, maybe Kimbrel is that guy, but ideally you want one other guy along with Kimbrel that you could put into any spot. Any bases loaded, 1 out, and they're going to get out of it. Whatever the case may be, I think you need that one guy that you could trust no matter what. I don't know if they have that right now, but who knows? Some guys are beginning to emerge and could continue to emerge, as the season goes along.
Well, can I interest you in new Dodger Pedro Baez as a solution to the bullpen?
But I knew coming.
Pedro Baez signs with the Dodgers, minor league contract. Of course, he left after the 2020 season to go to Houston. He made 4 appearances for them in 2021, 3 appearances for them in 2022, was released. The Dodgers signed him to a minor league contract, sent him to the developmental league. I mean, you look at it, it's a loss of velocity. He was throwing 94.4 in 2020. He was throwing 90.8 last year and 90.4 this season. 90.2, excuse me. 11.57 ERA this year in 3 appearances over 2 1/3 innings. Does this even ripple the waters in your world, or is this a non-story?
The guy you just mentioned does not interest me at all. Maybe if he could return to the Pedro Baez that was with the Dodgers, that would interest me. But I think it's pretty clear he's not that guy. The velo's way down, and obviously with that, the effectiveness is way down as well. So who knows? Maybe they could send him to the instructional league or whatever and work with him on some stuff mechanically. I don't know what caused the velo to drop that much. Maybe it's injury related. Who knows? Maybe it's mechanical. But that's 94 to 90 is a very significant drop. So if he's throwing 90, 91, I have zero interest in that. But who knows? The Dodgers worked their magic before. Maybe they could get him back to what he used to be. Because, hey, as much hate as Pedro Baez got when he was on the Dodgers, like if you look at the numbers, he was like always pretty good, you know?
Yeah, it gave you lots of quality sort of appearances. Like it was a bulk guy, and he
Yeah.
could give you a 3.5 ERA, and you knew what you were getting from him. And so, look, it costs nothing to sign the guy to a minor league deal.
Exactly. Yeah.
We'll see what happens. You mentioned one other news story: Tommy Kahnle to the 15-day injured list with forearm inflammation. That's pretty much the worst thing you ever want to hear for a guy who's coming off of the injuries he has, and so something to monitor there. One other thing before we get to mailbag questions. Michael Grove, Ryan Pepio, two friends of the DodgerHeads show, both make their major league debuts in the last couple of weeks. Pepio, 2 appearances, goes 7 innings, 3 hits, 3 earned runs, 8 walks, 8 strikeouts. Michael Grove, 3 2/3 innings, 4 hits, 3 walks, 3 strikeouts, 4 runs, none of them earned. What did you see from either of those guys? Anything you liked as sort of a, hey, we might have something here for the 2022 season? Or was this just sort of like a, hey, congrats, make the debut, go back to the minor leagues, and we'll see you next year?
Yeah, I think it was more of the latter. Like, I think both guys were kind of called up out of necessity at this point. Like, the Dodgers are playing, every day, even multiple games some days, no off days. 2 key members of the rotation right now are on the IL, so they need starters. I think Pepio, obviously, he's got the higher prospect pedigree of the two, and you could see it when he pitches. Like, you see the stuff is there. But you mentioned 8 walks, 8 innings or whatever. That's something that I just think he's probably a year away. I'd say, like, he's got to go back down to AAA, refine your command. We know he's got that great changeup. That's a big league changeup right there. It's just a matter of getting the other stuff up as well. So I still think the future is really bright for him. It's just he's probably a next year guy, maybe late in September this year if they need a spot start. And then Michael Grove, he didn't get much. We didn't see much of him. Like, he made one start and he got screwed. Lux makes that error, and then he gives up like 4 runs after that. And then after that, he actually settled in and looked pretty well. So he's a guy. He's got a lower prospect pedigree, so I wasn't really expecting a whole lot from him. And I actually thought he looked pretty good. He was throwing pretty hard, 95, 96. I didn't necessarily know he threw that hard. He's a guy that I think you could call up if you need a spot start, but kind of similar. He's probably a year away from actually being like a contributor. But hey, when you like, it's good to just give guys experience like that. Like, those are guys who you plan on them being part of your rotation in the future, and if you could give them this experience at the big league level, they could take whatever they can from their outing, learn from it, and then go back down and apply it there and get better. So I think that was good to see. I think the overall starting rotation depth, like when you consider those 2 guys are like your eighth or ninth options or whatever, you're in a pretty good spot, I'd say.
Yeah, and I mean, I would just add the only thing is both of those guys, we just talked about a bullpen that's got 5 guys that you feel good about and 3 spots that are sort of up for grabs. I mean, if Pepio could absolutely be an impact reliever throwing high 90s with the changeup that he has, and even Grove, who's got, basically, like you said, 95, 96 mile an hour fastball that he pairs with a hard breaking ball, slow breaking ball. I mean, both of those guys could get auditions late in the season to say, hey, let's see what happens. And I think it was Grove that even said, or in the interview, like, the Dodgers train them to be ready for that. They recognize that their best chance of contributing at the major league level this season is to come out of the bullpen. And so sometimes what they'll do is they'll have an opener before Grove pitches 4 or 5 innings, just so he gets in the habit of not being the guy that throws the first pitch, that kind of thing. So we'll see. Like you said, good for both of those guys to get their call-ups. I'm hoping to have them both back on the show just to hear what that was like to get the phone call, that kind of thing. But stay tuned for that. All right, let's close the show out with the mailbag. We appreciate folks that submitted those to the Dodger Blue 1958 Twitter account. Of course, you can send those to Daniel, to me on Twitter as well. But I picked out 3. We got a bunch of submissions, but I think these 3 kind of covered, I would say, 80% of the questions that we haven't covered. Lots of Muncie stuff that hopefully we already answered. But this one was from Kevin. Gavin Lux question. He says, Lux has had enough time in the majors to show something. He appears to be a second baseman with a decent glove, a good on-base percentage, below average bat with little pop. Do you believe in him more than this assessment? I'll start with you, Daniel. I mean, do you think this is what Gavin Lux is, which is a decent second baseman, decent glove, will get a pretty decent on-base percentage with no power?
I mean, I think he'll end up having a little more power than he's shown. I definitely think we've had to kind of change our expectations a little bit for him, like with each year. I think 2019, I think, was the year he went off in Double A and Triple A, and obviously the expectations for him after that are sky high. And with each year, we've kind of had to temper them a little more and more. I think he could be a productive player. I think he's really athletic. I think he's got some. I think I don't even know if I'd call him an average defender, if I'm being honest. Like, I'd probably put him below average there. So I think he could be better than what he's shown. And I think I would still, like, I don't think he's been bad to the point where you're like taking him out of the lineup or sending him down or anything. I think he's totally fine. Like, if you have him in there batting 8th or 9th, he's still, like, if you look across lineups across baseball, he's probably one of the better 8 or 9 hitters in the league.
Yeah.
No, he hasn't been great. So I think we got our expectations. Maybe he's not the future all-star, future MVP candidate type guy, but I still think he's a productive player that has come through. He's had some big hits this year.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would always sort of headline a Gavin Lux conversation with is he's 24 years old. So, you know, we're talking about a guy like Gonslin, who's kind of getting his first run. I mean, Gonslin's like 28, I think 27, 28. I mean, I would have to go back and look, but I wonder if Michael Grove and Ryan Pepio, two guys who made their debuts, they both might be older than Gavin Lux as well. And so that's sort of the first thing I would say is let's just pause a little bit and remember that this is a guy who's 24 and a half years old. He's not going to turn 25 until after the season. That's one thing. You look at the profile, he's above average when it comes to his strikeout, walk, and whiff rate, so he's kind of a good eye. That's why Kevin mentions the good on-base percentage. I think that's going to continue. But he's in the bottom third when it comes to exit velocity, hard hit percentage, barrel rate, that kind of stuff. And so I still am optimistic with Gavin Lux. I don't think he's going to live up to top 5 prospect in all of baseball, sort of perennial all-star type of status, but do I think Gavin Lux is going to be a starter in Major League Baseball for the next 7 to 10 years? Like, I actually do. I think he has the athleticism. I think, you know, we're probably not all that far away from the Dodgers kind of trying the Chris Taylor experiment with Gavin Lux, which is we're going to try you in left field. We're going to try you in center field. We're going to let your athleticism play out there because who knows? He might sort of settle into one of those spots a little bit more defensively when it's the outfield is. And maybe this is a stupid thing from some guy who's not a baseball expert saying this, but it feels like the outfield is a place where your athleticism can cover up a lot of other things, whereas in infield, it's a lot more about fundamentals and it's a lot more about getting your feet right and that kind of thing, whereas in center field, it's like see the ball, go get the ball, that kind of thing, and go make the catch. And so I think that might be where he lands defensively. And look, if you can be an average defensive center fielder that can play a little bit of left field and can play a little bit of second base and shortstop in a pinch, and then can, you know, have a league average on base percentage with 10 to 12 home runs, like that's a solid major league career. So I would just temper all of it with he's 24 years old. Let's give him a little bit more time. But it's nice to see this is progress. This is progress from where he has been, which I think is a good thing. Okay, next question here from Aaron. And this is Laura is another person who sent a similar question. But is there one, if you could target one person, or maybe you want to start with a position, but one person that you would target if you were the Dodgers between now and the trade deadline, is there somebody out there that immediately comes to mind, Daniel?
It's who's even going to be available, just because it's still so early in the year and you got to look at what teams are like truly going to be out of it. And it also, to me, it depends on, you know, the Dodgers' health between now and the deadline. Like, what's the situation with Kershaw? What's the situation with Treinen? What's the situation with Heaney? But I still think if you could go out and get a premier starting pitcher, that's probably going to help your club the most. So I know for a fact the Reds are probably sellers because they're not any good. So I'm just going to go with the easy answer and say Luis Castillo. He's only made a few starts this year and hasn't been anything spectacular, but we know what he can be when he's at his best. We know he's like probably one of the number 2 starters in baseball. So if you could add that to your rotation, I think that helps guys in the bullpen. It helps guys in the back of the rotation. I think they're fine, you know, in the lineup, especially when you look at even like, you know, if a lineup guy gets hurt and Rios is playing more, I don't necessarily look at that as a downgrade. So I think they're fine in the lineup. Bullpen would be the other one, but I think it's too early to say, A, what relievers are going to be available, and B, what relievers are even good, just because they're so volatile and it's a year-to-year thing with them. So it's probably too early to start talking relievers. So I'm going to go with the easy answer, Luis Castillo, which we've been talking about him for years now, so that shouldn't surprise, you know, anyone.
Yeah, the other name that gets thrown around a lot is Frankie Montas of the A's, another team that seems to have no aspirations of winning baseball games. Although, hey, watch out for the Reds, scoring a lot of runs lately. All right, but it's interesting. I mean, it's funny because Montas I still think of as a prospect. Castillo feels like he's been in my life. I mean, both of these guys are basically the same age. They both are arbitration eligible next year, and then a free agent in 2024. In both of those cases, Montas has been better this year. He's made 9 appearances, 3.5 ERA. 55 strikeouts, a whip of basically 1. Castillo, as you said, just 3 starts, an ERA of 4.6. Castillo, of course, has done it more consistently. You know, he's had a solid, basically been in our lives since 2017, whereas Montes has kind of been up and down a little bit. Made his major league debut in 2015, but as far as a serious starter, probably 2018, and has been a bit of a roller coaster there. So I think those are the 2 guys, but I'm with you. I mean, there's so much baseball left to play. I would just say too, I don't know if starter is where I would target, because you know, if you upgrade the Tyler Anderson spot in the rotation, like, do you really feel like you've made a huge difference? Tyler Anderson has been really solid for the Dodgers. And that's not even including Andrew Heaney, who has been out. And so, obviously, if there are injuries between now and then, that would be a concern. But yes, both of those guys would be big upgrades over Tyler Anderson. I'm not saying that they're on par with Tyler Anderson. What I'm saying is, like, do you feel like that's a need where it's like, hey, we're going to go give up prospects because we feel that much better about these guys than Tyler Anderson, and now our team's way better, and then you move Anderson to the bullpen? I don't know. That's the one question I would have about starting pitching.
To me, I think it would come down to Kershaw's health. Like, I think if you have a healthy Kershaw the way he's been throwing, I think you're probably good in the rotation. But I think given his past injury history, given his current injury, he's out right now. You can't necessarily count on, we're going to get Kershaw back in July and our rotation will be fine. Like, we really don't know that. And Heaney's another one who's been out. I think he's probably closer to returning than Kershaw, which is good news. But I think if all those guys are healthy, I don't think you necessarily need a starter. I just don't. You can't necessarily count on that. So I think it's, wait and see mode. I know everyone loves to talk trades, like we should go make a move now, blah blah blah. That's just not super realistic. Like, the Dodgers are still games. They don't know what the club's gonna look like 2 months from now. So you don't even know what your need is. Like, you could have two position players get hurt, and now all of a sudden you're in the market for a middle infielder or something, whereas right now there's no need for that. So we'll just wait and see. I know trades are fun to talk about, but that's more of a question we could answer a month or two down the road, I'd say.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out, too, that the Dodgers, from a prospect position, they have, like, sort of a glut of guys that are a roster crunch that is coming. I think Justin said there's, like, 7 dudes that they would need to add to the 40-man next year. They've already got a bunch of guys on there, so curious to see. But I do think this is sort of a prime position for the Dodgers to make some of those moves, to clear out some of the guys that are deserve to be on a 40-man roster a year from now that they won't have room for. So they could be pieces that are big enough to go get a front-of-the-line starting pitcher as well. Okay, last question here. We're over the hour mark, so we'll do this one quickly. But who should take Max Muncy's place? Dodgers on top asked this question. Basically, who should take Max Muncy's place in the lineup? Why is he playing? Yada, yada, yada. He mentions Miguel Vargas, Michael Busch, Jake Lamb. I know there's a name out there that you and I both are sort of frustrated that maybe isn't getting talked about as much. But who would be the first guy to take Max Muncy's spot in your estimation, Daniel?
Are we saying not on the roster?
No, I mean anybody. This person seems to be looking in AAA, but I think you and I both agree there's a guy in the Major League roster right now that should be taking his spot already.
Look, if Edwin Rios is going to hit a home run just about every time he's, to me, his name should be in the lineup more. That's kind of an easy switch just because they're both left-handed. They both play third base, so I definitely would give Rios more at bats. That's just at the Major League level. You also mentioned the possibility of Smith DHing more. That if Austin Barnes is going to swing it well too, like, why not? I might as well at least milk this time when Austin Barnes is hot and swinging the bat well, because we know that's probably not going to last forever. So there's I think all of them, like, Hans or Alberto against left-handers is not the worst option in the world. So I think all the Major League guys, I look to them first before going down to AAA. I know Michael Busch has obviously been lighting the world on fire, so that's the obvious name. But as we just had the Gavin Lux conversation, like just because you're lighting the world on fire in Double A or Triple A doesn't mean you're necessarily going to come up and do the same thing in the big leagues. So I think as far as like Bush and Vargas go, the most important thing for them right now is getting at every single day. So unless you're going to call them up and give them an everyday spot at second base or third base or whatever, I don't think it makes sense for them to come up and start 2 or 3 times a week. So maybe if there's like an injury or something, let's say Justin Turner gets hurt, Max Muncy, it turns dealing with an injury and goes on the IL, then maybe you could start talking about Bush or Vargas. But for now, I would just, give more bats to the guys that are on the major league roster because they've shown they could get the job done. Like it's not like offense has necessarily been a problem for the Dodgers the last, couple weeks here.
Yeah, none of the guys mentioned, Vargas, Bush, and Lamb, are on the 40-man roster either. So you'd have to make some moves at that point as well. So yeah, Rios, 935 OPS, 5 home runs in 48 plate appearances thus far this season. That's the obvious one.
More of that, yeah.
Yeah. Zach McKinstry's another guy that nobody seems to talk about. He's absolutely crushing it at AAA. He's a guy that could
40-man, so that's just an easy.
Totally.
We've seen him get called up like twice already this season. So I think there's probably a lot of different directions you look before you get to Bush and Vargas, who even though they've been killing it at the minor league level, they're still projected for next season or maybe at the end of the season, not necessarily ready just yet.
Yeah, and if you wanted to mix things up even and give Chris Taylor some time in the infield, I mean, Kevin Pillar is the guy at the minor league level who's absolutely tearing the cover off the ball. He's had an OPS over 1,000 basically the entirety of the season. I think he's got 9 home runs. And so you could easily bring him in to start playing some left field, move Chris Taylor into second base, third base, that kind of range, and move some things around there. So I think Vargas, Bush, Lamb are, Lamb, I don't know. I still don't know what to do with Jake Lamb, but I think Vargas and Bush, as you said, unless there's like a major injury where there's like an everyday position that is up, I think it would be Bush before Vargas, and I don't think either of those guys are going to be. I'd be surprised if either of them got an extended run with the major league club at any point this season, just because they're going to have to add them to the 40-man roster as well. So Ed Rios is the pick for Daniel for me as guys that would take Max Muncy's spot if there was a hole. So hey, we appreciate all of the mailbag questions. Again, feel free to send those over every Saturday, Sunday, Monday, that kind of range we record on Monday mornings. So we'd be happy to answer those questions. We appreciate you joining us. I was off last week, so thanks for coming back. It's good to I had to come back. If Max Muncy, the ball goes through his legs and the Dodgers go undefeated while I'm gone, who knows? Maybe I'm not in this chair this morning, but he lets it go through his legs. Max Muncy wanted me back in the chair, so I appreciate that.
Great for good, huh?
Yeah, and Daniel almost had the broom. We almost had the full week sweep that we had.
I meant to mention that at the beginning of the show. I was missing my friend here, but hey, we'll take what they go 6-1 last week because they did have that one off day. So 6-1 overall, have won 7 out of 8. So they're playing good baseball, even though it doesn't always feel like it. And now they got a series. They play the Nats. Then they play Arizona, so there's the other week where they could go, 6-1 or whatever. So, I know we prefer a bigger division lead here, but as long as the Dodgers keep doing what they're doing, everything will work itself out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you joining as always. Subscribe, ring the notification bell below. That's Daniel. You can check him out at Twitter at @DStarkand. Check out Dodger Blue 1958 on Instagram. There's a promo that's going on right now where you can win some free gear from Foco. So make sure to check that out. Dodger Blue 1958 on Twitter. Of course, DodgerBlue.com for all the latest. We appreciate you joining us. Subscribe to us, DodgerHeads, wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next time.